Thank you, Governor Gilmore. Good evening, everyone. I want to say, Jim, when you pulled out that cell phone, you may hear that annoying sound when it goes off. I hear cha-ching, cha-ching. And now that I'm a federal employee, I need that more than ever. It is a real honor to be with you all tonight, to be with this kind of exclusive fraternity, and with apologies to my good friend Governor McDonnell. Perhaps you might call the rest of us the League of Former Excellencies. And it's only because of Virginia's unique, and I think some of us might say kind of slightly stupid rule of this one-term non-consecutive approach that we could ever have 9 living governors together in one location. Now, I would echo what everybody who said before me, and I'll try to be brief, although as a senator that may be an oxymoron. But we all have had unique stories of how we got to this opportunity. And regardless of what other position we may ever hold, there's no greater honor than being governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, than being called His Excellency. And I have to tell you, there are certain similarities amongst all 9 of us that haven't been pointed out yet. I was afraid coming number 7 or 8 or whatever number I am tonight, and if Lynn was going to get all the good stuff up front, that we might, he might take some of this stuff. But all 9 of us have been covered at one point or another by Tyler Whitley at the Richmond paper. I think Tyler started with Thomas Jefferson in terms of governors he covered. All 9 of us have had at one point or another a relatively unflattering picture by Bob Brown, also from the TD. And each one of us, regardless of party, and I think, George, you'd agree with this too, each one of us at one point or another have been bedeviled by Delegate Lacey Putney, who, matter of fact, since he was elected first in 1962, is going to have outlived and outdone all of us. So there are some uniquenesses about us. Now, the 2 things I want to, it's getting late, and I've got to actually head back to Washington, but there are 2 takeaways that I want to leave. One is, and this builds off of some of the similar themes of my other colleagues, is that, you can't afford, particularly at this moment, and as Governor Gilmore said, we face enormous challenges in this country, $16 trillion in debt, enormous imbalances on spending and revenues that have to be addressed. But if we're going to get that done, whether it's at Virginia or on a national level, we cannot afford to leave any part of Virginia behind. Now, when I had the honor of running for governor of Virginia, I was the high-tech guy from Northern Virginia. But one thing I recognized was that Virginia would not be successful if all the good jobs were in Fairfax, or Chesterfield, or Virginia Beach. As Governor Allen mentioned, you shouldn't have to leave your hometown to find a world-class job. And Lord knows in this globalization of the economy, if we can find ways that companies can send a job to Bangalore, we ought to be able to find an equal way to find a job and send a job to Danville or Martinsville. That's why, as I think back about some of the things that I was most proud of, is working with folks and many of the legislators here, particularly with the Tobacco Commission, to make sure that we'd put in the biggest rural broadband in America at that point, in Southside Virginia. That after we had dislocations, particularly in some of the textile industries in Southside, we were on the ground within 24 hours of the one-stop center, trying to work with those displaced workers of what was next. I remember as well my best day as governor, and Governor Allen, you mentioned yours, I remember mine. It was actually down in Russell County in Lebanon, and we were in Lebanon High School, and we were announcing 300 high-tech jobs that paid double the county's average. And there's a lot of stuff in politics that we all who have been involved, whatever level you serve at, that you make sacrifices with your family and challenges, but there are moments that make it all worth it. And I remember that day at Russell High School, a young man named Michael Kaiser came up to me, and as clear as a bell, saying, Governor, he was going off to Virginia Tech. He said, before this, I always thought I'd have to move away from Russell County if I ever wanted to find a world-class job. Well, not only does Michael Kaiser now work in Russell County, but his brother moved up from North Carolina, where he had a tech job, to go back home because we were able to recognize, as I think all of my colleagues have, that we cannot, in this world economy, if we're going to grow this economy, we can't afford to leave anybody behind, because we're in a world competition for talent. And whether that's rural communities or building on the potential that Lyndon Holton said, that we've got to take advantage of everybody in Virginia, regardless of their color or nationality or where they were born, if we're going to compete and win. And the second lesson I learned was about the, if you're going to do in politics, the value of building trust. When I was elected governor in 2002, that was my first time being elected to anything. You know, some of you may have forgotten, I got the silver medal when I ran against John Warner in 1996. Remember that Mark, not John stuff? Sometimes I wish John would have warned me a little more about the Senate. But when I came in, I was a Democrat and with a 2-to-1 Republican legislature. And echoing again what others have said, with this unique kind of one-term only approach, my thought was every day that you don't put points on the board, every day that you don't get something done, you're not going to get that day back. And if there was going to be any ability to get anything done, particularly as a new guy coming in, it meant you're going to have to build some trust. Trust with people that maybe you didn't agree with on everything. And that meant, you had to forge those relationships with folks who might have come in with a different partisan affiliation. And that's what I went about trying to do. I remember those first 2 years, I got my butt kicked almost every day. Governor Bellow's, it was me who supported and led the charge on that transportation referendum in Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia, and I still got the scars to show. And even though we were defeated, though, we kept trying to reach out. And I remember all the press and the pundits time and again saying, "Oh, Warner, you are naive. You don't get it. You don't get it. You can't make that happen." Well, as some of these folks in this room would remember, I spent a lot of time inviting my Republican colleagues over to the mansion for dinners and occasionally late-night cocktails. I think I may have been the only governor that would show up at more than one delegate's apartment with pizza and beer, trying to forge a relationship. There were some great bipartisan basketball games that ended up with some conversations afterwards that led to discussions about how we could try to get Virginia's problem settled. And yes, Jim, that cell phone came in use many, many times. If I couldn't get to the legislator, I'd get to their wife or their daughter or their girlfriend or whatever it took. And after a couple of years, you know what? We started getting stuff done. And in Virginia, in 2005, Virginia was recognized as the best managed state in the country. It was recognized as the best state for business. And it was recognized as the best state for a lifetime of educational opportunity for children. Now that only happened because at the end of the day, we, not me, not my administration, we recognized if it was a good idea, it didn't really matter if it had a D or R next to it. That the vast majority of Virginians hired us to get stuff done, not to simply point out what's wrong with the other guys. And God knows, if there is anything that just plagues Washington, it is the single most frustrating place in America, maybe in the world at this point. It is this back and forth blame game as opposed to getting things done. I may not agree with Governor Gilmore and everything, but I give him enormous credit and attention for laying out ideas about how we can get this economy growing again. I may have different ideas, but we ought to not be willing to not compete with ideas, but at the end of the day realize it can't just be about competition, it also has to be about getting stuff done. Without that plan that George Allen mentioned, you're not going to score. And that's why tonight, and I've got to head back after I hear from Governor Kane and Governor McDonald to get back into the fray. That's why, though, I wanted to be here tonight because, This is what the Sorensen Institute's all about. I remember Lee Middleditch. Where's Lee? Where's Lee? Is Lee still here? I remember Lee Middleditch coming to me 19 years ago as a business guy at that point saying, we got this idea, he and Michael Bills had said, let's see if we can take that unique specialness about Virginia, where people in Richmond know people in Norfolk and they know people in Winchester, where we can actually not just be against stuff, but that where we can train people to take a role in public service. I wasn't sure it was going to get much traction. But 19 years later, we've got every living governor and a great former lieutenant governor. I'm proud of somebody I had in my cabinet, John Hager, here celebrating what is so unique about Virginia. So I want to commend the Sorensen Institute for the job they've done, for the job they need to keep doing, and for the fact that we do need a little bit more Virginia kind of can-do, get stuff done in Washington and across the country if we're going to regain that kind of national growth and national and international leadership we need. Thank you very much. And with that, let me turn it over to somebody who's been a friend of mine for 32 years. We met each other in law school. He became a lawyer, I became a client. And for a number of those 32 years, I probably spent more time with Tim Kaine than I did with my wife, Lisa, or he did with his wife, Ann. He was a great city council member of this great city. He was a great mayor of Richmond. I had the great honor to work with him as lieutenant governor, and then he has gone on to be a great governor. So let me present to you His Former Excellency, the 70th Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, my friend Tim Kaine.